"I'm sorry, we can't come. My wife is hosting a birthday dinner, and we can't just leave our guests." Those were the exact words my son, Ethan, told the doctor while I was fighting for my life. My heart had stopped 3 times before reaching the hospital, and yet, my 42-year-old son chose canapes and champagne over his mother's final moments. Now I lie here, in a dim hospital room, machines humming beside me, the faint smell of antiseptic in the air. It's past 2 a.m. I can't sleep. Every beat from the heart monitor reminds me that each breath could be my last, and that my sons are only a few blocks away. Clinking glasses under golden lights. Nurse Claire adjusts my IV with gentle hands. She's young, maybe the same age as my daughters-in-law, yet her eyes hold more warmth than my own family has shown in years. "Try to rest, Mrs. Hale," she whispers. "Rest? How can I rest when I've just learned my life matters less than a social gathering?" Dr. Lawrence told me what my sons said when he called them earlier. His voice was calm, but his eyes betrayed disgust. "I made it clear your condition was critical. I told them this could be your final night. And yet," my youngest, Ryan, replied, "Doctor, can't it wait until tomorrow? Lily planned everything weeks ago. Mom's strong. She always pulls through. I always pull through." That phrase echoes like an old curse. I pulled through when their father left me with debts and 2 teenage boys to feed. I pulled through when I scrubbed office floors at dawn, waited tables till dusk, and stitched dresses past midnight just to afford their school fees. My hands still carry the tiny scars from those nights at the sewing machine. I pulled through when Ethan needed money for a house, selling my little yellow home, the one with the lilac tree they used to climb, so he could afford his dream place. He promised he'd pay me back in 2 years. It's been 8. I pulled through when Ryan begged for a loan to start his business, the savings I'd spent a lifetime building. "6 months, Mom," he said. "You'll get it all back with interest." The business folded in 3. I pulled through when Lily, at Christmas dinner, told me my navy dress looked a bit too old-fashioned for this crowd. I pulled through when they stopped inviting me to family events because, as they put it, "You know how Mom likes to share her opinions." But this time feels different. This time, I can't pull through, because this isn't about money or pride or fashion. This is about love, or the absence of it. Dr. Lawrence said my heart stopped for 4 minutes before they brought me back. 4 minutes where I was technically dead. And my sons were worried about table decor and hors d'oeuvres. As the machines continued their steady rhythm beside me, I realized that the thing breaking inside me isn't my heart. It's something deeper. Something final. Tomorrow, they'll bring flowers. They'll tell me they didn't know, but I'll know the truth. That when it mattered most, they chose a party over their mother. And that truth will change everything. But before dawn breaks, I remember something I buried decades ago, a memory that makes me realize this betrayal didn't start tonight. It began the moment I taught my sons that I would always forgive them. When I close my eyes, I try to push away the smell of disinfectant and the sharp sting in my chest. Instead, my mind drifts 40 years back to a small house with peeling paint and laughter spilling through thin walls. Ethan was 2, and Ryan had just been born. We didn't have much, just a second-hand crib, a wobbly kitchen table, and a few cracked dishes. But we had each other. Back then, I believed love could fill any gap that poverty left. My husband, Robert, worked long hours at a furniture factory. Every night, I'd wait for him by the window, the babies asleep beside me. But one night, he didn't come home. He never did again. He left me a note that said, "I can't do this anymore. You'll be better off without me." Better off? I was 26, with 2 children and no savings. But I pulled through. I found a job cleaning offices at dawn, then waited tables at a diner until evening. At night, When exhaustion made my body tremble, I sewed clothes to sell at the weekend market. Every dollar went toward formula, school supplies, and shoes that always seemed to shrink faster than they wore out. I told myself it was worth it. Everything for my boys. I'd whisper as I worked under the yellow light of the kitchen bulb. And for years, it was worth it. I watched them grow into bright, confident young men. Ethan with his curious eyes and soft heart. Ryan with his big dreams and endless questions. They'd hug me, kiss my cheeks, and say, "You're the best mom in the world." I believed them. The first crack appeared when Ethan turned 25. He brought home a woman named Layla, beautiful, graceful, the kind who seemed to sparkle even when standing still. From the moment she stepped into my home, I knew she didn't like me. She smiled politely, but looked around my modest apartment like she was inspecting a thrift store. "Mrs. Hale," she said with that syrupy tone people use when they're pretending to be kind. "Wouldn't it be lovely if Ethan and I hosted Christmas this year? My family has a tradition, and it's so special." That Christmas, my turkey went untouched. The house was silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator. I ate a slice of pie alone, pretending it was enough. When I called Ethan the next day, he said, "It was great, Mom. Layla's mom made this incredible roast. You'd love it." It stung. Not because I wanted the roast, but because I realized my cooking, my love language, had suddenly become obsolete. 2 years later, Ryan met Hannah. Unlike Layla, she didn't openly dismiss me. She was subtler, her words coated in honey, but heavy with judgment. "Oh, Mrs. Hale, how adorable that you still use that old sewing machine," she said once, running a manicured finger over the worn surface. "It's so vintage." Vintage. That word became a dagger wrapped in velvet. Slowly, their visits became fewer, calls shorter, dinners rarer, and before I knew it, I had become a holiday afterthought. Someone they loved in theory, but avoided in practice. Linda, my neighbor, once told me, "Nora, your daughters-in-law are rewriting your role in your sons' lives." I laughed it off. I didn't want to believe her, but deep down, I knew she was right. And yet, I kept forgiving them. I kept showing up. I kept hoping they'd remember who raised them. But now, lying here in this cold hospital bed, I finally understand. Love doesn't vanish in a day. It fades, one unreturned call at a time. And as I stared at the ceiling, I remembered the moment everything truly changed. The day I sold the only home I ever loved to help the son who would later refuse to visit me. It was 2 years after Ryan's wedding when Ethan came to me, his voice trembling with excitement and desperation. "Mom," he said, sitting at my kitchen table, "Layla and I found our dream home. It's in the Crestview district. Quiet, safe, perfect for starting a family. We just need a little help with the down payment." I didn't even let him finish before my heart started racing. Crestview was one of those places I'd only ever driven through. Big lawns, children playing in matching outfits, couples watering their flower beds at sunset. It was the kind of life I always wanted for my boys. "How much?" I asked softly. 80,000, he said. "I know it's a lot, but Layla's parents already helped with the deposit, and we just need a little more to close. A little more." $80,000, the money I'd been saving my entire life. The safety net I'd built in case my health ever failed me. The money that was supposed to protect me in old age. But I didn't think twice. I looked at my son's hopeful eyes, at the boy I had once carried through sleepless nights, and I said the words that would unravel everything. "I'll sell the house." The next week, I signed the papers for the little yellow house that had been my world for 35 years. The home where my children took their first steps, where I marked their heights on the doorframe, where I cooked 1,000 dinners and cried behind closed doors more times than I could count. When I handed Ethan the check, He hugged me tightly. You're amazing, Mom. I'll pay you back in 2 years, I promise. That was 8 years ago. I moved into a small apartment downtown, a gray, narrow place with peeling paint and no elevator. Every time I climbed those stairs, I told myself it was worth it because my son had everything he'd ever wanted. The first time I visited their new home, I wore my best dress and carried a chocolate cake I'd made from scratch, Ethan's favorite since childhood. Layla opened the door with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Oh, Mrs. Hale, what a surprise. You should have called. We're having some friends over tonight. Her eyes flicked down to the cake box in my hands. Oh, thank you. It looks delicious. But Ethan's watching his cholesterol now. We're trying to cut out sugar. She took the box like it was a contaminated relic and excused herself back inside. I stood there for a few seconds, listening to the sound of laughter drifting from their dining room, laughter I used to be part of. Then I turned around and walked home alone. That night, I cried myself to sleep. Not because they hadn't invited me in. I had gotten used to that kind of silence. I cried because my son was sick, and I'd found out from his wife's small talk at the door of a house I had paid for. With Ryan, things weren't any easier. When his electronics business began to collapse, he came to me, not as a son seeking advice, but as a man asking for an investor. Mom, it's just a rough patch. I need $8,000 to keep it afloat. I'll pay you back in no time. I gave him the money. No contracts, no conditions, just faith. 3 months later, the business shut down. And with it, my last bit of security vanished. But I still forgave them. I always forgave them, because that's what mothers do. We love even when we shouldn't. Only now, as I stare at these hospital walls, I realize forgiveness has a cost. And I've been paying it all my life. And the final payment came on the day I turned 66, when I realized my own birthday had quietly vanished beneath someone else's celebration. The heart pain began on my 66th birthday. Though the truth is, it had started long before that day. We were all gathered at Ethan's house for Sunday lunch. It was supposed to be a small get-together, but it wasn't for me. No one remembered it was my birthday, not my son's, not their wives, not even a passing mention. The table was set perfectly, of course. Layla had prepared a light, modern menu, grilled chicken, cucumber salad, and sparkling water in tall crystal glasses. Not exactly what I'd call a celebration meal, but I smiled anyway. Mom, you look tired, Ryan said, not looking up from his phone. Are you sleeping well? I wanted to tell him the truth, that I hadn't slept properly in weeks, that every night I woke up with a burning pressure in my chest and an ache spreading down my arm. But I didn't want to worry them. I didn't want to seem like a burden. I'm fine, sweetheart, I said. Just a little indigestion lately. Layla gave a polite laugh. It's just age, Nora. I tell my mom the same thing. We have to start eating lighter as we get older. Fewer spices, less fat. Her tone was smooth but dismissive. The way people talk when they believe your time has already passed. When the meal ended, I stood to gather the plates. Layla stopped me with a firm hand. Oh, don't bother, Mrs. Hale. We'll handle it. You just relax. It was meant to sound kind, but it didn't. It sounded like, please don't touch my dishes. I sat quietly in the corner while they talked about their vacations, work parties, and renovations, things I couldn't contribute to anymore. I felt invisible. Then, as I was about to leave, Hannah arrived, smiling as always, full of energy. Guess what? She said, waving her phone. We finally booked the ballroom for my birthday, the Grand Crest Hotel, this Wednesday. I've been planning it for months. I blinked. Wednesday. My birthday was that Sunday, but no one said a word about it. Ryan kissed her on the cheek. You deserve it, honey. We'll make it special. I smiled politely, pretending my heart hadn't just cracked a little more. That night, the pain in my chest became unbearable. It felt like something was tightening around my ribs, squeezing the air out of me. At 11 p.m., I called Ethan. "Son," I whispered, "I don't feel well. My chest hurts terribly." He sighed, distracted. "Mom, it's late. Did you drink your tea? Maybe it's just stress. You've been anxious lately about Hannah's party. I think it's something worse." Okay. Let's not panic. We'll stop by tomorrow, okay? After the party. After the party. The words echoed in my ears long after I hung up. That night, I barely slept. The pain crawled up my neck, through my jaw, down my arm. I tried to breathe slowly, tried not to cry, because even in agony, I didn't want to disturb anyone. By dawn, I couldn't take it anymore. I called my neighbor, Linda, my only real friend. When she heard my voice, she didn't hesitate. "Nora, that sounds serious. I'm coming over right now." "No, please. It's Hannah's party today. I don't want to ruin it." "Ruin it?" she said sharply. "You might be having a heart attack, and you're worried about cake and decorations?" Her words hit me like thunder, because she was right. But somewhere deep down, I already knew that for my sons, for their wives, a party really was more important than my life. And as Linda rushed me to the hospital that morning, I didn't yet know that the night ahead would reveal just how far love could fade, and how easily a mother could be forgotten. Linda arrived before sunrise. When she saw me sitting on the edge of my bed, clutching my chest, drenched in cold sweat, her eyes widened in fear. "We are going to the hospital," she said, her voice steady but urgent. "I don't want to cause a fuss," I whispered, but my words came out shaky, half swallowed by pain. "You're not causing a fuss, Nora. You're fighting for your life." She wrapped a shawl around my shoulders and half carried me down the stairs. The world around me blurred. The early morning air was cold, the sky pale gray, and every heartbeat felt like a hammer against my ribs. By the time we reached the hospital, the pain had become unbearable. It wasn't just pain. It was a crushing weight, as though something inside me had decided to cave in. They rushed me through the emergency doors, voices echoing around me. Severe chest pain. Code blue. I remember the flash of lights, the metallic smell, the oxygen mask pressing against my face. Linda's hand was the last thing I felt before everything went black. When I opened my eyes again, I was in a different room, machines humming steadily beside me. My throat was dry, and my chest burned where they'd cut to save me. A nurse leaned over me. "It was Claire?" "Welcome back, Mrs. Hale," she said softly. "You gave us quite a scare. How long was I out?" "You've been in surgery for 6 hours," she said. "You went into cardiac arrest 3 times. The doctor said it's a miracle you're alive." 3 times. My heart had failed 3 times. I turned my head toward the door. "My sons," I whispered. "Are they here?" Claire hesitated. "The doctor spoke with them during surgery," she said carefully. "He explained how critical your condition was." I could already feel the answer before I asked. "And what did they say?" She looked at me with pity. "They said they couldn't come. They're hosting a large event tonight and couldn't leave the guests unattended. They said you were strong, that you'd recover." For a moment, I couldn't breathe, not from the pain in my chest, but from the coldness of those words. They couldn't come. I had been dead for 4 minutes, and my sons couldn't come. Claire tried to comfort me. "Please don't think about it right now. You need rest." But how does a mother rest after learning her children chose music and champagne over her heartbeat? Linda was asleep in a chair beside me, her head resting on her arms. When she woke up, she took one look at my face and knew. "They didn't come, did they?" she whispered. I shook my head. Tears slid down my cheeks. silent but endless. "Oh, Nora," she said, taking my hand. "You've given everything to those boys." "I know," I said quietly. "And I think they know it too. They just stopped caring." That night, the hospital lights flickered softly, shadows moving across the walls like ghosts. I lay awake, listening to the machine that kept time for a heart that had already given up once. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a mother. I felt like a patient, an old woman whose value had expired. And as I stared at the ceiling, I made a promise to myself. If I survived this, I would stop begging for love that had already left me. But survival comes with clarity, and mine arrived the next morning when the phone rang and my son dared to ask, "Why didn't you tell us you were sick?" The morning sunlight slipped through the blinds, spilling thin gold lines across my hospital blanket. I hadn't slept. My chest ached with every breath, but the ache inside me, the one no medicine could reach, was far worse. Nurse Claire brought me breakfast I couldn't eat and a phone I didn't want. "Your son called, Mrs. Hale," she said softly. "He wants to speak with you." I hesitated, staring at the device like it was something dangerous. After last night, after the silence when I needed them most, what could he possibly say? Still, I took the phone. My voice cracked when I answered. "Hello? Mom?" Ethan's voice was careful, cautious, as if he knew he was stepping on broken glass. "Why didn't you tell us you were sick?" For a moment, I was too stunned to respond. My throat tightened. "Didn't tell you?" I whispered. "Ethan, I called you last night. I told you I couldn't breathe." There was a pause, long enough for me to hear the hum of life support machines and the distant footsteps in the hallway. "Oh, that," he said finally. "We thought you were just having one of your anxiety episodes again. You sounded fine on the phone." "Fine?" The word came out like a bitter laugh. "Ethan," my heart stopped 3 times. He went quiet. I could hear voices in the background, Layla's sharp, muffled tone. Then he sighed. "Mom, I'm sorry, okay? We were in the middle of hosting guests. You could have just called an ambulance instead of worrying everyone." I gripped the edge of the blanket to stop my hands from shaking. "I did call an ambulance, Ethan, because my own children couldn't be bothered to come." "Mom, please don't make this dramatic," he said, his voice now edged with irritation. "You know how sensitive Layla is about the parties. She spent weeks planning it, and there it was, the line that turned pain into fury." "Sensitive?" I said quietly. "I nearly died, Ethan, but I'm glad she had a good night." He didn't reply. The silence between us felt heavier than the heart monitor beeping beside me. "I'm hanging up now," I said softly. "I need to rest." Before he could answer, I ended the call. My hand trembled as I placed the phone on the bedside table. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for choosing myself. A few minutes later, Linda walked in with her usual quiet strength, holding a cup of coffee and a worried expression. "You okay, Nora?" "I got a call," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "He asked why I didn't tell him I was dying." Linda sat beside me and shook her head. "People like that don't understand until it's too late." Her words echoed in my mind long after she left. Too late. I looked at the window, the world outside bright and alive, and realized how small my world had become. My sons had built new lives where I was nothing more than an occasional inconvenience, a holiday phone call, a framed picture collecting dust in their hallway. The woman who once carried them through storms had become a footnote in their stories. And yet, I still loved them. That was the cruelest part. Love doesn't die just because it's unwanted. It lingers, patient and painful. As I lay there, I promised myself one thing. If I ever walked out of that hospital, I'd stop waiting for their affection. I'd build my peace elsewhere, even if it meant doing it alone. Because sometimes, The hardest truth is realizing the people you love most are also the ones who let you break quietly. But that peace I longed for didn't come easily, because 2 days later, one of them finally decided to visit, and what he said that day would wound me deeper than silence ever could. 2 days after that phone call, the door creaked open and Ethan walked into my hospital room. For a moment, I didn't recognize him. He wore a crisp white shirt, expensive shoes, and a polished wristwatch that probably cost more than my old car. His face was clean-shaven, but there was something unfamiliar in his expression, guilt mixed with discomfort, like he was here out of duty, not love. "Mom," he said softly, standing by the door as if crossing the room might stain him. I forced a smile. "You came." He nodded, eyes darting to the machines, the wires, the dull hum of the heart monitor. "You look better," he said. Better. The word almost made me laugh. My skin was pale, my voice weak, and I could feel the weight of exhaustion pulling me down. But he didn't come here for truth. He came to say what made him feel less guilty. "How's Layla?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "She's fine," he said quickly. "She wanted to come, but she's busy cleaning up after the party. We had so many guests, it went on until midnight." I nodded, pretending not to notice the sting in his voice when he mentioned her. My body ached, but my heart hurt worse. He moved to the chair beside my bed, sat stiffly, and adjusted his sleeve as if the conversation itself made him uncomfortable. "I talked to Dr. Lawrence," he said. "He told me it was a heart attack." "You really scared everyone, Mom." "Scared everyone?" I repeated quietly. "I didn't mean to inconvenience anyone." He frowned. "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" I asked, looking at him, really looking. The boy I once held through nightmares was now a man who couldn't meet my eyes. He sighed. "Mom, you can't keep letting stress get to you like this. You worry too much. About me, about Ryan, about everything. Maybe if you relaxed a bit more." I almost laughed at the absurdity. "Relax?" "Ethan, I worked 3 jobs to make sure you and your brother had food, shoes, a roof. I haven't relaxed in 40 years. He didn't respond. His gaze shifted toward the window. After a long pause, he said, "We've been talking, Layla and me. We think it might be better if you moved into an assisted living home. You'll get professional care there, and we can visit whenever we can." The words hit me like a slap. "A home? Just until you're stronger," he said quickly. "It'll be easier for everyone." "Easier for everyone," I repeated. "Or easier for you?" He flinched. "Mom, please don't make this harder than it is." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him that I'd already lived in every kind of home, ones filled with silence, with work, with sacrifices he never saw. But now, he wanted to send me to one where I'd be surrounded by strangers, waiting for visits that would never come. Instead, I simply said, "If that's what you think is best." He looked relieved, and that hurt most of all. When he stood to leave, he hesitated at the door. "I'll come by tomorrow," he said, but he didn't. The next day, it was just me and the machines again, my only companions, constant and unfeeling. For the first time, I began to wonder whether love could really die, not suddenly, but slowly, in the spaces between birthdays and phone calls, until all that's left is memory. But the truth about love, I was about to learn, isn't just in what dies, it's in what's left behind. Because that night, someone else came to visit, and their words would change everything I thought I knew about my family. That night, after Ethan's visit, the hospital was quieter than usual. The hallway lights dimmed to a soft amber glow, and the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor became the only sound keeping me company. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the moment Ethan suggested a home, his polite tones slicing deeper than any knife ever could. Around midnight, a soft knock echoed from the door. I thought it was Nurse Claire checking in again. But when the door opened, I froze. It wasn't her. It was Ryan. He stood in the doorway, still wearing his work clothes, a wrinkled shirt, tie loosened around his neck. Exhaustion etched into his face. But there was something else there too, something his brother hadn't shown. Guilt, raw and unfiltered. "Mom," he said quietly. For a moment, I couldn't speak. "You came," I finally whispered. He nodded, stepping closer. His eyes darted toward the machines, the tubes, the IV lines running into my hand. "You look." He stopped himself before finishing the sentence. "I'm sorry I didn't come sooner." I studied his face, the boy who used to chase fireflies in the backyard, who once built me a Mother's Day card out of cereal boxes because we couldn't afford real paper. "I'm glad you're here now," I said softly. He sat down beside me, his hands trembling slightly. "Ethan told me what happened," he said. "He said it was just mild chest pain. I didn't realize." I smiled weakly. "Mild? I think dying 3 times qualifies as more than that." His face crumpled, and he looked down. "I should have been here, Mom. I should have called. I don't even know when I stopped being the kind of son you deserved." For the first time in years, I saw tears in his eyes. Real ones. "It's strange," I said gently. "You spend your whole life thinking love is this big, grand thing, hugs, gifts, celebrations. But it's really just showing up. You showed up, Ryan. That's all I ever wanted." He looked up at me, his jaw trembling. "You shouldn't have to settle for just that." We sat in silence for a moment. The only sound was the low hum of the monitor, counting my fragile heartbeats. Then, he said something I didn't expect. "Mom, there's something I need to tell you. Something I've been hiding." My pulse quickened. "What is it?" He swallowed hard. "I didn't lose all the business money like I told you. I did at first, yes. But then I rebuilt. The company started doing well again. I've been earning more than ever for the last 3 years." I stared at him, stunned. "3 years? You never told me." He shook his head, shame filling his voice. "I didn't want Ethan to know. He always talks about helping you one day, but he never actually does. And he paused, his eyes glistening. "I didn't want to make him look bad. I thought it would just cause more fights." A long silence stretched between us. The truth hung heavy in the air. "So you let me struggle alone," I said quietly. "You let me believe you both had nothing." His lips parted, but no sound came out. The guilt in his eyes said everything. I turned away, blinking back tears. "You boys always had this strange loyalty to each other, even if it meant breaking your mother's heart." He reached for my hand, but I pulled it back gently. "I forgive you, Ryan, but forgiveness doesn't erase the years of silence. It only makes them louder." He nodded slowly, tears sliding down his face. "I'll make it right, Mom. I swear." I looked at him and smiled sadly. "I hope you do, not for me, but for the man you'll see in the mirror tomorrow." As he left that night, I watched him disappear down the corridor. For the first time in years, I felt the smallest flicker of something, not quite peace, but the beginning of it. But peace, as I would soon learn, is fragile, because the next morning, Ethan came back, and this time, he didn't come to apologize. He came with papers in his hand and an offer that would test every ounce of love I had left. Morning came with the sound of wheels squeaking in the hallway and the faint aroma of coffee drifting from the nurse's station. I'd barely slept after Ryan's visit. His confession kept replaying in my mind. His success, his silence, his guilt. I thought about calling him, telling him I forgave him fully, but before I could decide, the door opened again. Ethan stood there, holding a brown leather folder in his hand. He didn't look like a man visiting his recovering mother. He looked like someone ready for a meeting. "Morning, Mom," he said, forcing a smile that didn't touch his eyes. "You look better today." "I'm alive," I replied quietly. "That's something." He chuckled awkwardly and stepped closer. "I actually came because I wanted to talk about something important." I noticed the folder in his hand immediately. My stomach tightened. "What's that?" He hesitated for a second, then set it on the bedside table. "It's an agreement. Layla and I talked last night. We think it's best to sell your apartment and move you somewhere with proper care. A senior residence in Crestview. Really nice place. 5-star amenities, on-site nurses, daily activities. You'll love it." My heart sank. "Sell my apartment?" "Well," he said quickly, "it's technically still in your name, but you don't really use it anymore. You'll be much safer in a community. And, honestly, it's time to start simplifying things. We could handle everything for you." I stared at him, the man my son had become. Smooth, organized, confident, but detached. "So," I said slowly, "you want me to sell the last thing I own, so you can handle things?" He smiled as if I hadn't understood. "Mom, it's for your own good. You don't have to worry about rent, bills, any of that. We'll take care of it all. You deserve peace now." Peace. That word again. They always used it when they were trying to take something from me. My time, my money, my home. "I've already spoken to a realtor," Ethan continued. "We could close in a few weeks. You'd have a beautiful private suite and people to talk to. Doesn't that sound nice?" I looked down at my trembling hands. "Ethan, do you remember the little yellow house on Maple Street?" He frowned. "Of course I do." "Why?" "I sold it so you could buy your first home," I said softly. "I gave up my garden, my memories, the only place your father ever told me he loved me, because you said it was your dream. And now, you want to take the last roof I have over my head?" He sighed, impatient now. "Mom, this isn't about taking anything. It's about helping you transition. Don't make it emotional." "Don't make it emotional?" I repeated, almost laughing. "Ethan, everything I've ever done was emotional. That's what being a mother is. You think you're doing me a favor, but you're trying to erase me neatly, to fold me into a box where I won't interrupt your dinners or ruin your parties." He clenched his jaw. "That's not fair." "It's true." Silence stretched between us, heavy, suffocating. Finally, he said, "You always take things personally." "I suppose that's because they always happen to me," I whispered. He stared at me for a moment, something flickering behind his eyes. Maybe guilt, maybe anger. Then he stood. "I'll leave the papers here. Just think about it, okay?" I watched him walk out, the door closing with a quiet click that felt louder than thunder. When I was sure he was gone, I reached for the folder. My fingers brushed the cold metal clasp, and a sharp pain rippled through my chest. I wasn't sure if it was my heart or heartbreak again. I didn't open the folder. I didn't need to. I already knew what it contained. The last thread of control over a life I'd built from nothing. But fate has a strange way of intervening, because before I could decide what to do with those papers, someone else found them first. And what they did next would turn my sons against each other in a way I never saw coming. The morning after Ethan's visit, the folder still sat on the bedside table, untouched. I couldn't bring myself to open it. Every time I glanced at it, it felt less like paper and more like a gravestone, marking the slow death of a mother's place in her sons' lives. Nurse Claire came in to check my vitals. "You're quiet today," she said gently. "Just tired," I replied. "Of everything." She smiled softly but didn't press. "You have a visitor waiting downstairs," she said after a moment. "He said he's family." My first thought was Ethan. Maybe he'd come to apologize. But when the door opened, it was Ryan. He looked different this time, determined, focused. There was a storm behind his eyes. Without saying a word, he picked up the leather folder from my bedside table and flipped it open. "Did Ethan bring this?" he asked. I nodded slowly. "He said it was an agreement to move me into his senior home. He wants to sell my apartment." Ryan's jaw tightened. "Of course he does." He scanned the papers quickly, his expression darkening with every line. "He's already filled in some of the forms. He listed himself as your financial power of attorney. Did you sign anything?" "No," I said. "Not yet." "Good," he muttered, snapping the folder shut. "Because if you had, you'd have given him full control over your finances." My chest tightened, not from the surgery this time, but from disbelief. "He said it was to make things easier for me." Ryan let out a bitter laugh. "Easier for him, maybe. He's been trying to refinance his house for months. Layla told me quietly at a dinner last week. He needs cash, and fast." My heart sank. "You think he's using me?" Ryan looked at me with sad eyes. "I don't think, Mom, I know." He sat down at my bedside, his voice softening. "I should have seen it coming. Ethan's been drowning financially since that second mortgage. He wouldn't admit it, of course. He never does. He'll smile through everything until it collapses on him." I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar ache of betrayal. "I raised them both the same," I whispered. "How did they end up so different?" Ryan sighed. "Because you raised us with love, Mom. But life taught Ethan that appearances matter more." The room fell silent for a long time. Then Ryan stood. "I'm taking these papers," he said firmly. "He doesn't get to decide what happens to you." Before I could protest, the door opened, and there was Ethan, standing in the doorway, his face pale with anger. "What are you doing with that?" Ethan snapped. Ryan turned slowly. "Stopping you from stealing from our mother." Ethan's jaw clenched. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I think I do," Ryan shot back. "You're desperate, Ethan. You've always been good at pretending to have everything under control while everyone else pays for it." Ethan took a step forward. "Give me the folder." Ryan shook his head. "Not a chance." The tension in the room was suffocating. My heart monitor began to beep faster. "Stop it, both of you," I said weakly. "Please." But neither listened. Years of rivalry and resentment erupted like a dam breaking. Ethan's voice rose. "You think you're some kind of hero now, Ryan? You vanished for years, let Mom struggle, and suddenly you're the saint? And you," Ryan shot back, "sold your integrity the moment money got tight." I couldn't take it. "Enough," I shouted, my voice cracking under the strain. They froze, both turning to me, two grown men, suddenly looking like the frightened boys they once were. "Do you hear yourselves?" I whispered. "You're fighting over who loves me more while both of you keep breaking my heart." Ethan looked away. Ryan's shoulders slumped. In that quiet, all I could hear was the slow, unsteady rhythm of my own heart. "I'm not signing anything," I said firmly. "And I'm not moving anywhere, not yet." Ryan nodded silently. Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it again. When they finally left the room, separately, without a word to each other, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The truth was out now, ugly and raw. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Families don't heal just because secrets are spoken. Sometimes, that's when the real wounds start to bleed. And sure enough, the bleeding wasn't just metaphorical, because later that night, my fragile heart began to fail again, forcing both my sons to face what they'd been avoiding all along. The hallway had gone quiet again after my sons left, but the air still trembled with the echo of their voices. Even after they were gone, I could hear them. Ethan's sharp tone, Ryan's heavy breathing, the crack of old wounds reopening, the sound of family unraveling in a hospital room. I sat there staring at the monitor beside me, watching the green line flicker like a tired heartbeat. It struck me then how fragile it all was, how quickly love can turn into guilt, and guilt into silence. Nurse Claire peeked in a few minutes later. "Everything all right, Mrs. Hale?" I nodded, forcing a weak smile. "Just a little family drama." She smiled sadly. "You'd be surprised how often that happens here. Hospitals have a way of showing people who they really are." When she left, I leaned back, closing my eyes. The exhaustion wasn't just physical anymore. It felt spiritual, like my soul had grown old before my body ever did. I must have dozed off because when I opened my eyes again, the lights were dim and the clock read nearly midnight. The room felt colder. My chest felt tighter than before, an invisible band squeezing the air from my lungs. At first, I tried to sit up, thinking it was just anxiety, but the pain spread fast, burning down my arm, up my neck, into my jaw. I pressed the call button. Nothing. The monitor's beeping sped up, echoing louder and louder. I gasped, clutching my chest. "Please." The door burst open. Claire rushed in, followed by Dr. Lawrence. The edges of my vision blurred. "She's going into arrest again." I could hear their voices, but not their faces. My body trembled as the pain swallowed me whole. For a moment, just a moment, it was quiet. I was floating, not in a dream, not in a nightmare, just in silence. A strange, calm silence. I saw light, soft and golden, like morning sun through lace curtains. And then, voices. Faint, distant, but familiar. "Mom, please, stay with us." Ryan's voice. Then Ethan's, shaky and scared. "Do something, please." I wanted to tell them I was right there, that they didn't have to beg, but my mouth wouldn't move. My body felt miles away. Then, darkness. When I opened my eyes again, it was morning. The light through the blinds looked softer this time, like even the sun was treading carefully. Claire stood beside my bed, exhaustion etched into her face. "You're awake," she said, her voice trembling with relief. "We almost lost you." I turned my head slowly. My sons were both there. Ethan slumped in a chair, eyes red. Ryan standing by the window, his shoulders heavy. "How long was I out?" I croaked. "Nearly 4 hours," Claire said. "Your heart stopped again. They brought you back." Ethan lifted his head. His eyes met mine, and for the first time in years, I saw something real in them. Fear. Not the kind born from inconvenience, but from love he didn't know how to show. "I thought you were gone," he whispered. His voice broke on the last word. Ryan walked over and rested a hand on my arm. "We're here now, Mom. Both of us." And for a few seconds, I believed him. The room went quiet except for the hum of machines and the faint tick of the clock. I could feel both of them watching me. Two men trying to piece together the mother they'd nearly buried. "I don't want you two fighting anymore," I said softly. "Whatever's broken between you, fix it. Don't wait for a funeral to start loving again." They nodded, both unable to speak. But deep down, I knew this moment wouldn't last. Guilt fades. Promises fade. And love, if it isn't tended to, fades too. And just when I thought the storm had passed, a single phone call the next morning would drag our fragile peace back into chaos. A call that would reveal the one secret my sons had both kept from me all along. The morning after my heart stopped for the second time, I woke to the sound of hushed voices outside my hospital door. The world around me was soft. The muted beeping of machines, the faint scent of disinfectant, the sunlight spilling in through half-closed blinds. At first, I thought it was the nurses talking. But as my hearing sharpened, I recognized the voices instantly. Ethan, Ryan. I froze. Their tones were low, tense, laced with something I hadn't heard between them in years, fear mixed with shame. You should have told her, Ryan said quietly. Ethan's voice came back strained. And said what? That I gambled away most of the second mortgage? That the investment was just a cover for debt? She'd never forgive me. My breath caught in my throat. I turned my head slightly toward the door. Ryan hissed. You almost made her sign away her home for it, Ethan. How could you even think of that? I panicked. Ethan snapped. The bank's been calling nonstop. If they foreclose, I'll lose everything. The house, the car, Layla's business loan. I just needed time. You needed help, Ryan said bitterly. But instead of asking, you tried to bury her with your problems. Their voices rose, the sound of old resentment igniting once more. Don't lecture me, Ethan spat. You think you're better because you hid your success from her? Because you let her think you were broke while you built a company behind her back? I didn't want to embarrass you, Ryan shot back. You always had to be the golden one, the perfect son. I was just trying not to take that away from you. The silence that followed was heavy, the kind that comes only when truth finally burns through the last layer of pretense. I closed my eyes, my chest tightening. All these years, all those sleepless nights worrying about them, sacrificing everything. And they had both been lying to me, for different reasons, yes. But the same wound ran through both. Pride. Pride had taken my sons and turned them into strangers. I turned my head toward the window, blinking against the blur of sunlight. A single tear slipped down my cheek. Moments later, the door opened, and they entered, pretending nothing had happened. Morning, Mom, Ryan said softly. Ethan forced a smile. How are you feeling? I looked at them both. Two men wearing masks they didn't realize I could see right through. Better, I said quietly. I just need rest. Ethan exhaled in relief. That's good. The doctor says you're improving. I nodded, pretending to believe it all. The smiles, the small talk, the gentle voices. But inside, something had shifted. Something permanent. When they left for lunch, I turned to Claire, who was tidying the table beside me. Nurse, I said softly, can I ask you a favor? She looked up, kind as ever. Of course. If my sons start arguing in the hallway again, I whispered, don't stop them. Let them say whatever needs to be said. Sometimes truth only comes out in anger. Claire's expression softened. You heard them, didn't you? I gave a faint, tired smile. Mother's always here, even what isn't meant for them. The rest of the afternoon passed in a strange calm. I wasn't angry anymore, not even sad. Just done. Done chasing apologies that never came. Done forgiving before anyone asked. I realized then that love doesn't just fade. It exhausts itself, and once it's gone, you stop fighting for what's already buried. As the sun began to set, I made a decision, one that would change everything. I would write a letter to both of them. Not to blame, not to scold, but to make them remember who I really was, before guilt and greed turned them into men I barely recognized. But as I began to write that letter, a new face walked through my door, someone neither of my sons expected, carrying a truth that would finally expose the cost of everything they'd hidden from me. I had just begun writing the first lines of my letter when the door creaked open again. At first, I thought one of my sons had returned, maybe Ethan, ready with another apology he didn't mean. But the footsteps were different. Slower, hesitant, unsure. When I looked up, I saw a young woman standing there. She couldn't have been more than 30, dressed neatly in a beige coat, her dark hair pulled back in a braid. She held a small envelope in her hand, and when our eyes met, she froze. like she hadn't expected me to be awake. "Mrs. Hale?" she asked softly. "Yes," I said cautiously. "Who are you?" She stepped inside, closing the door gently behind her. "My name is Emily Turner. I I work for the Crestview Financial Group. I'm so sorry to bother you, but I thought you should know something before it's too late." Her voice trembled, and my stomach twisted. "Before what's too late?" She looked at me, guilt clouding her expression. "Your son Ethan came to us about a month ago. He applied for a second refinancing on his home and used your apartment as collateral. When the paperwork was processed, I realized something was off. The signatures didn't match. I tried contacting him again, but he said you were aware of it. I needed to be sure." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My eyes went to the bedside table, to the folder Ethan had brought, still sitting there like a silent witness. "He forged my signature?" I whispered. Emily looked away. "I can't say that officially, but it appears that way. He must have panicked when his credit was denied. I think he planned to have you sign a few documents to make it official." The room seemed to spin. All the air felt heavy, thick with betrayal. I had always feared Ethan would disappoint me, but this wasn't disappointment. This was deception. "I didn't want to come here," Emily said softly. "But when I saw the hospital listed as your current address in our file, I knew something was wrong. I couldn't stay quiet." Tears stung my eyes. "Thank you for telling me," I said quietly. "Most people wouldn't risk their job for a stranger." "You're not a stranger," she said gently. "You're a mother who deserves the truth." When she left, the room felt colder, emptier. Somehow, I stared at the envelope she had placed on my blanket before leaving. Inside were photocopies, proof that my son, my own flesh and blood, had tried to sell the last piece of my life for his convenience. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about the way love had turned into a transaction. A few minutes later, Ryan entered. His hair was messy, his tie loosened. He stopped when he saw the papers in my hand. "What's that?" I didn't speak at first. I just handed him the envelope. He skimmed the contents, his expression darkening by the second. "He didn't," he muttered. "He did." Ryan's hands trembled. "I'll handle this, Mom." I shook my head. "No, Ryan. You'll do nothing. This time, I'll handle it." He looked at me confused. "What do you mean?" I turned toward the window, my reflection faint in the glass. A tired face, but one that had finally found its resolve. "I've spent my whole life cleaning up after both of you. Maybe that's why you never learned consequences." He looked down, ashamed. "I'll call the bank tomorrow," I said softly, "and I'll tell them the truth. If Ethan forged my name, he'll answer for it." Ryan nodded slowly, though I could see the dread in his eyes. "I know you love your brother," I whispered. "But love isn't letting someone drown you to keep themselves afloat." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The heart monitor beside me beeped steadily, keeping time with a decision I could no longer avoid. But the truth has a way of spreading faster than we think, because before morning came, Ethan found out what I planned to do, and his desperate attempt to stop me would become the breaking point that none of us could ever take back. I barely slept that night. The letter from the bank lay folded beneath my pillow, its weight heavier than any secret I had ever carried. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan's face, not the little boy who used to run barefoot through the yard, but the man who'd turned my signature into a weapon. By morning, the light was pale and cold, washing the hospital room in a gray stillness. I had made up my mind. I would call the bank myself. I would tell them everything. No more protecting, no more silence. But before I could reach for the phone, the door burst open. It was Ethan. He looked frantic, his tie crooked, his hair uncombed, his face pale and drawn. In his hand was the very same folder he'd left with me days ago. "Mom," he said breathlessly, shutting the door behind him. "We need to talk." I stared at him quietly. "How did you find out?" He froze. "Find out about what?" I didn't blink. "The forgery. The bank. The woman who came here last night." The color drained from his face. His hand tightened around the folder. "She wasn't supposed to." He stopped, catching himself, then exhaled sharply. "Mom, you don't understand. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." "Didn't mean to?" I repeated softly. "You used my name, Ethan. You tried to sell the only thing I have left." His voice cracked. "I was desperate. The company's collapsing. The house Layla's been spending money like it's endless. I just needed time to fix it." I felt the familiar sting of pity. But this time, it didn't win. "You've always needed time," I said. "And every time you took it from me." He paced the room, running his hand through his hair. "Please, Mom, if you report this, I'll lose everything. They'll press charges. You'll finally face the consequences," I said, interrupting him. "Something you've avoided your whole life." He stopped pacing and turned toward me, eyes wide with panic. "You can't do this to me." I met his gaze. "I didn't do this to you. You did this to yourself." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, something in him snapped. He slammed the folder onto the bedside table, papers scattering across the floor. "You don't get it," he shouted, his voice breaking. "Everything I've done, every deal, every lie, it was for us. For the family. I just wanted to make you proud." The words echoed through the room like thunder. I looked at him, really looked. My son, trembling and broken, drowning in his own excuses. "You don't make a mother proud by destroying her trust," I said softly. "You make her proud by being honest when it matters most." He sank into the chair, burying his face in his hands. "I don't know how to fix this, Mom." I wanted to reach for him, to pull him close and tell him everything would be all right. But I couldn't lie anymore. Not to him, not to myself. "Start by telling the truth," I said. "To the bank, to your wife, to yourself." He looked up, his eyes red. "And if I lose everything? Then you start again," I whispered. "Like I did, like I always did." A long silence stretched between us. Finally, he stood, gathered the scattered papers, and nodded faintly. "I'll fix it," he said. "I promise." As he walked out of the room, I felt my heart ache. Not from illness, but from something deeper. Because I knew promises like his. They were fragile, and fragile things rarely survive the truth. But sometimes, life doesn't wait for redemption. Because that very night, I received a call that would change everything again. And this time, it wasn't about Ethan's mistakes. It was about my own failing time. The day passed slowly, as if time itself were afraid to move forward. The nurses came and went, checking vitals, adjusting tubes, offering polite smiles that never reached their eyes. I tried to rest, but my thoughts refused to stay still. Ethan's words still lingered in the air. "I'll fix it." I wanted to believe him. I truly did. But belief, I'd learned, is a fragile thing, and mine had been stretched thin over too many broken promises. By evening, the rain had started, soft at first, then steady, the sound of it tapping against the window like a heartbeat. The hospital felt emptier than usual. Ryan hadn't returned all day. Maybe he needed space. Maybe he didn't know how to face what his brother had done. Around 9 p.m., Nurse Claire came in to check my IV. "You should try to sleep soon, Mrs. Hale," she said gently. "I'll try," I murmured, but sleep never came. Instead, the phone on the bedside table rang, shrill and sudden, cutting through the quiet like a blade. Claire frowned. "That's odd. It's so late." She handed me the receiver, and for a moment I hesitated. Hello? A familiar voice answered, steady, professional, but edged with sympathy. Mrs. Hale? This is Dr. Lawrence. I'm sorry to call you at this hour. Something in his tone made my stomach twist. Is something wrong? He exhaled softly. I just received your latest test results. The damage from your cardiac arrest was more extensive than we initially thought. Your heart function has dropped significantly. I swallowed hard. How? How bad is it? There was a pause. You're stable for now, but we need to be realistic. If your heart goes into failure again, resuscitation might not hold. I suggest you start preparing any personal matters, just in case. The room fell silent. Even the rain outside seemed to stop, just in case. Those 3 words echoed through my mind like the toll of a distant bell. Thank you, doctor, I managed to say. My voice didn't sound like mine, calm, almost detached. After he hung up, Claire looked at me with quiet concern. Do you want me to call your family? I shook my head slowly. No, not yet. Let them rest. But in truth, I didn't want to wake them. I wanted a moment that was just mine. No guilt, no apologies, no explaining. Just silence. I turned toward the window. The rain had softened again, streaking down the glass in thin silver lines. The city lights blurred into smudges of gold and gray. For the first time, I let myself feel it. The fear, the exhaustion, the grief. Not just for my sons, but for all the years I had given away piece by piece, thinking love would refill what life took. I thought about the yellow house I'd sold, the birthdays they'd forgotten, the nights I'd spent awake sewing their school uniforms while the world slept. I thought about laughter that had faded, and forgiveness that had cost me everything. And then I thought about the letter, the one I had started to write before Emily arrived. I reached for the notepad on my tray and began again. My dear boys, if you're reading this, it means time has done what I no longer could. It stopped waiting for you to come around. Don't cry for me. I've already spent a lifetime crying for both of you. Just promise me one thing. When you look at each other, see me there. Not the woman who gave you money or forgiveness, but the one who taught you love, even when it hurt to give it. By the time I finished, my hands were shaking. I folded the paper carefully and placed it in the drawer beside me. Then, for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace, the quiet kind that comes when there's nothing left to lose. But fate, it seems, wasn't finished yet, because before the night was over, one final visitor would arrive at my door, carrying words that would rewrite everything I thought I knew about how my story would end. The hospital was silent except for the whisper of rain against the windows. It was the kind of night where everything felt suspended, time, breath, even thought. The letter I'd written rested quietly in the drawer beside me, its presence both comforting and final. I had just begun to drift into a fragile half-sleep when I heard the door open again. At first, I thought it was Nurse Claire doing her rounds, but the footsteps were heavier, slower, hesitant, like someone unsure they had the right to be there. When I turned my head, I saw Layla. She stood by the doorway, clutching a small paper bag, her perfectly styled hair damp from the rain. She looked smaller than I remembered, not in stature, but in spirit. Mrs. Hale, she said softly. I blinked, unsure if I was dreaming. Layla? It's late. I know, she whispered, stepping closer. I didn't think I'd find the courage to come, but Ethan, he told me everything. My heart tightened. Everything? She nodded. About the forgery, the debt, the papers, and about the letter from the bank. Her eyes filled with tears. I told him he needed to confess, that he couldn't hide it from you. But when he came home tonight, he was broken. I've never seen him cry before. I looked away, staring at the rain tracing lines down the glass. He made his choices. Yes, she said softly. But I made mine too. She set the paper bag on the tray beside me and opened it. Inside was a small plastic container, homemade soup. I remembered you said once that no one cooks for you anymore. I didn't know if this would help, but I wanted to try. The smell of chicken and herbs filled the room. Simple, warm, human. My throat tightened. I hadn't expected kindness from her. Thank you, I whispered. That's very thoughtful. She hesitated, then sat in the chair beside me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The rain did all the talking. Finally, she said, "You were right about Ethan." I turned to her. He's proud. He hides everything behind that perfect smile, even from me. But underneath, he's terrified of failing you. I sighed. He's already failed himself. Layla nodded, wiping a tear from her cheek. He's scared, Mrs. Hale. He thinks if you go, he'll never forgive himself. Her words hung heavy in the air. I wanted to tell her that guilt is just another form of love. Twisted, painful, but real. But I was too tired. Layla, I said gently, you're not like him. You didn't grow up with my mistakes. She frowned. Your mistakes? I smiled faintly. I raised my boys to be strong, but I never taught them how to be humble. I taught them to win, but not how to lose. That's where I failed. She reached out, touching my hand, a simple, human gesture I hadn't felt in too long. You didn't fail, she whispered. You loved them. Sometimes that's the only thing we can do. For the first time in years, I saw her not as the polished daughter-in-law who had replaced me, but as another woman trying to hold a family together. When she stood to leave, she hesitated at the door. He'll be back in the morning, she said quietly. He wants to tell you something himself. I nodded. Then I'll wait. After she left, I took a small spoonful of the soup, warm, salty, rich with herbs. It tasted like comfort, like something I hadn't realized I missed. And as I lay back, staring at the ceiling, I wondered if perhaps forgiveness wasn't always something you gave. Maybe sometimes it was something you received, quietly, when you least deserved it. But when dawn finally came, Ethan did return, not with excuses this time, but with something I never expected. A truth that would change the way I saw both my sons forever. The rain had stopped by morning, leaving behind a soft gray light that spilled through the window like mist. The air smelled clean, too clean, like the world had washed itself while I slept. I was still thinking about Layla's visit, about the warmth in her eyes, and the soup that sat half-finished beside me. For the first time in a long while, I had slept without waking from pain. But peace never lasts long in my story. At a little past 8, the door opened quietly. Ethan stepped in. He looked like a man who hadn't slept at all, eyes swollen, face pale. The weight of the world slumped across his shoulders. "Morning, Mom," he said, his voice barely a whisper. I nodded. "You're early." He hesitated at the doorway for a moment, then crossed the room, sitting in the chair Layla had occupied the night before. For a long while, neither of us spoke. Finally, I said softly, "She came to see me." He looked up sharply. "Layla?" "Yes. She told me you talked to her, that you finally told her the truth." He nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the floor. "I did. I told her everything. About the forgery, the debt, the second mortgage. I didn't want to lie anymore." I studied his face. The exhaustion there wasn't just physical. It was the kind that comes after years of pretending everything's fine when it isn't. He took a deep breath. "Mom, there's something else I need to tell you. Something I should have said a long time ago." My chest tightened. "Go on." He rubbed his hands together. as if trying to find the courage hidden in his palms. When Dad left, I blamed you. The words hit harder than any betrayal could. I was 10, he continued quietly. I didn't understand what happened. Ryan was too young to remember. But I saw the fights, the nights you cried at the kitchen table. I thought you pushed him away. For years, I told myself everything that went wrong in my life started with that. Even when I knew it wasn't true, I still held on to it, because it was easier than facing the truth. I swallowed the ache building in my throat. And what is the truth, Ethan? He looked up at me, eyes glistening. That you were the only one who stayed. That you gave up everything so we could have something. That I've spent half my life trying to make up for things that weren't your fault, and the other half blaming you for my own mistakes. The room went silent except for the low hum of the machines. I don't deserve your forgiveness, he whispered. But I needed to say it before. His voice broke. Before I lose the chance. I reached out slowly, my hand trembling, and placed it over his. His skin was warm, shaking beneath my fingers. I stopped waiting for perfection a long time ago, Ethan, I said softly. You don't need to earn forgiveness. You just have to want to be better than yesterday. Tears slipped down his face. For the first time in decades, I saw my son, not the polished man, not the desperate provider, but the little boy I used to hold close when thunder scared him. He squeezed my hand. I'm sorry, Mom. I know, I said. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry too, for letting you think you had to be perfect to be loved. He nodded, unable to speak. For a long moment, we just sat there, two people who had finally stopped fighting the past long enough to see each other clearly. When he stood to leave, he kissed my forehead gently. Ryan's coming later, he said. We need to talk, all of us. As the door closed behind him, I felt a strange mixture of relief and dread, because peace, I'd learned, doesn't always mean the storm is over. Sometimes, it's just the quiet between two waves, and that next wave came sooner than I expected. When Ryan arrived that afternoon, carrying news that would turn Ethan's fragile redemption into a reckoning none of us were ready to face, the afternoon light came in gold and heavy, slanting across the room like a quiet spotlight. The rain was gone, replaced by still air and distant birdsong outside the window. Everything looked deceptively peaceful, the kind of peace that makes you nervous, because you know it's only temporary. Ethan had left an hour ago. I sat in silence, the imprint of his words still lingering in the air, fragile and raw. For the first time in years, I believed he truly meant what he said, but I also knew apologies, however sincere, don't erase the past. They only acknowledge the wreckage left behind. Around 3 o'clock, the door opened again. This time, it was Ryan. He didn't look like the confident man who had stood here before. His face was tight, jaw clenched, eyes shadowed. He carried something under his arm, a manila envelope, thick with papers. Mom, he said quietly. Ryan, I whispered. You look upset. He exhaled sharply and set the envelope on the table. I just came from the bank. My pulse quickened. The bank? He nodded, rubbing a hand through his hair. I wanted to make sure everything was sorted, that Ethan hadn't done any more damage. And? Ryan's voice broke slightly. It's worse than we thought. He opened the envelope and slid out several documents. Ethan didn't just use your apartment as collateral. He tried to move the title completely into his name. He filed it under a care agreement, using your illness as justification. I stared at him, my throat closing. He tried to take ownership? Ryan nodded grimly. If that woman from the bank hadn't intervened, he might have succeeded. You'd have nothing in your name right now. I pressed a trembling hand to my chest, feeling my heart thump weakly beneath my palm. He said he was fixing it. Ryan's expression softened. He probably is now. I believe he's sorry. But Mom, sorry doesn't undo paperwork. It doesn't erase the fact that he almost stole everything you ever worked for. The words hit like stones. I looked away, my eyes blurring with tears. He was desperate. Desperate doesn't make it right, Ryan said firmly. You can forgive him, but you can't keep letting him get away with it. I stayed silent, the hum of the machines filling the space between us. He stepped closer. Mom, I know you love him. I do too. But love isn't supposed to destroy you. Something in his tone made me look up. There it was. The same heartbreak. The same exhaustion I felt. He wasn't angry. He was hurt too. What did you do? I asked softly. Ryan hesitated. I confronted him. My breath caught. And he broke down. Said he couldn't live with himself anymore. He's going to the police tomorrow to admit what he did, to clear your name, legally and completely. Tears blurred my vision. He said that? Ryan nodded. He did. And for what it's worth, I think he means it. A long silence fell. I felt the tears spill freely this time, hot against my cheeks. I never wanted it to come to this, I whispered. I wanted my boys to grow up kind, not broken, not guilty. Ryan reached for my hand, his grip firm and steady. You raised us with love, Mom. The rest, that was life. It twists people, but you never stopped trying to hold us together, even when we didn't deserve it. I looked at him, the ache in my chest easing slightly. You're both my sons. You always will be. No matter how far apart you've drifted, you still share the same heart, even if it's cracked. He smiled faintly, though his eyes glistened. Then maybe we'll start fixing it together this time. As he turned to leave, the manila envelope still sat on the table, a silent reminder of how close love can come to turning into loss. And though the truth had finally been spoken, I could feel another storm gathering, not between my sons this time, but within myself. Because that night, as my body began to weaken again, I realized the hardest confession of all was still mine to make, one I'd kept buried for decades, about their father, and the real reason he never came back. That night, the quiet felt different, not peaceful, not comforting, just final. The room hummed softly, the steady rhythm of machines keeping time with my uneven breaths. The storm that had lived between my sons had finally calmed, but another storm had begun inside me, a truth I had carried for more than 40 years pressed at the edges of my chest. Heavier now that time itself felt fragile, I turned toward the window. The city lights shimmered below like tiny constellations, far away and unreachable, like the years I had lost trying to hold our family together. Ryan had gone home for the night. Ethan hadn't returned yet. I had been left alone with my thoughts. And that was when the past came calling, soft at first, like an old song I had tried to forget. Robert Hale, the man they both remembered as the father who left. But that wasn't the whole truth. When Robert walked out of our lives, I told my boys he couldn't handle the pressure, that he wanted freedom, not responsibility. I painted him as weak, selfish, gone by choice. It was easier that way. Easier for them to hate him than to question me. The real story was much darker. Robert hadn't left us for another woman. He hadn't disappeared because of money or love. He left because I asked him to. He was drinking back then, more than anyone knew. It started small, a few glasses after work, then turned into bottles hidden in cupboards. The nights got longer, the yelling louder. Once, he'd thrown a plate across the kitchen because the soup was too cold. Another time, he'd hit the walls so hard his knuckles bled. The boys were asleep upstairs. They never saw the bruises he left on my arms when the shouting turned into shaking. They never saw the night he stumbled home, smelling of whiskey and rage, whispering that he'd had enough of being trapped. I should have left then. But I didn't, because I kept believing love could heal him, that if I just stayed, he'd remember who he was. Then one night, when Ethan was 10 and Ryan just 6, I came home from the diner to find Robert passed out on the floor. The oven was still on. The gas was leaking. If I'd come home 5 minutes later, the entire house might have exploded, with my boys asleep upstairs. That night, I told him to leave. Not tomorrow. Not in the morning. Now. He cried, begged, promised. I told him I couldn't risk it again. He left before dawn. 2 weeks later, I got a letter from a hospital 3 towns over. There had been an accident, a car crash. Robert never survived, but I couldn't tell them. I couldn't let my boys grow up knowing their father died drunk and broken. So I changed the story. I turned his death into abandonment, because somehow that hurt less. And now, lying here decades later, I could still see their faces when they asked me why he never called. The small, hopeful looks that slowly turned into resentment. I had let them hate a ghost. A tear slipped down my cheek. I wasn't sure if it was guilt or relief, maybe both. The truth, I realized, isn't always meant to protect. Sometimes it just rots in silence until it poisons everything left. I closed my eyes and whispered into the stillness. I'm sorry, Robert. I'm sorry for turning your death into a lie. The heart monitor beeped softly, a steady rhythm in the dark. Somewhere deep inside, I felt something loosen, like a confession finally setting me free. But confessions rarely stay buried for long, because by morning, both my sons would be standing by my bed, demanding to know why I'd whispered their father's name in my sleep. I woke to the sound of voices, hushed, uncertain, just beyond the edge of sleep. The world came back slowly, like a photograph fading into focus. Light filtered through the blinds in pale stripes, painting the room in silver and gold. At first, I thought it was the nurses. But then I heard my name. Mom, Ryan said quietly. Can you hear us? I turned my head. Both of them were there, Ethan on the left, Ryan on the right. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I had dreamed of this, the two of them standing together, not as enemies, but as sons again. But the look in their eyes told me something was wrong. You said his name, Ryan said softly. Last night, we heard you. You said Robert. Ethan's voice followed, quieter, almost afraid. Were you dreaming about Dad? The name hung in the air like smoke. I hadn't spoken it aloud in years. Maybe decades. I tried to sit up, but my chest felt heavy. I was remembering, I said. It's been a long time. Ryan's brow furrowed. Mom, what exactly were you remembering? I hesitated, my pulse quickening. The truth pressed against my ribs like a living thing, desperate to be freed, but afraid of what it would destroy when it got out. Ethan stepped closer. You can tell us, please. And suddenly, I saw them as they were all those years ago, 2 boys in the doorway, clutching each other as I told them their father was gone. The smallest lie I ever told became the one that shaped their entire lives. I drew in a shaky breath. There's something I never told you about your father. They exchanged a glance. What do you mean? Ryan asked carefully. I looked down at my trembling hands. He didn't leave because he wanted to. I told you he walked out on us. That he stopped caring. But that wasn't the truth. Ethan's voice cracked. Then what was? The words came slow, breaking like waves against old stones. He was drinking, boys. More than anyone knew. It got bad, violent sometimes. He wasn't himself anymore. I thought I could save him, but love doesn't fix what people refuse to face. One night, he nearly burned the house down while you were both sleeping. Ryan's eyes widened, horror softening into heartbreak. What? I made him leave, I said. I begged him to go before he hurt you or himself. Ethan's voice was barely audible. And then? I swallowed. 2 weeks later, there was an accident. He was driving drunk. He didn't survive. The room fell silent. The monitor hummed steadily, the only sound between us. Ryan sank into the chair beside me, rubbing his forehead. All these years, I didn't tell you, I whispered, because I couldn't let you grow up hating yourselves for something that wasn't your fault. I wanted you to hate me instead. It was easier that way. Ethan's voice broke. We didn't hate you, Mom. We were angry, confused, but we never stopped loving you. Tears blurred my vision. You both deserved a better truth. I just didn't know how to give it without breaking you. Ryan reached for my hand. You didn't break us, he said quietly. You carried us, even when it cost you everything. For the first time in years, the air between us felt clean, like the lie had finally dissolved, leaving only what mattered. Love, imperfect but alive. Ethan leaned forward, his voice trembling. I wish I could have known him, the real him. I smiled faintly. Then remember the best parts of him in each other. That's how he lives on. The light through the window grew warmer, brushing across their faces. Two men still learning how to be sons. And for the first time in decades, I felt the weight lift. But as peace settled over us, I knew the story wasn't finished. Because that same evening, the doctors would come in with news that would turn our fragile moment of healing into a race against time. That afternoon, everything felt quieter, like the world had taken a deep breath and was afraid to let it out. The truth about Robert was finally spoken, and in the stillness that followed, something inside me eased. My sons had cried. I had cried, and for once, there was no anger left between us, only understanding, fragile but real. Ethan had left to file the report at the police station, the one that would clear my name and close the chapter of forgery for good. Ryan stayed behind, sitting beside my bed, holding my hand in the stillness. He didn't say much. He didn't have to. Sometimes silence speaks louder than words. I must have drifted off because when I opened my eyes again, the sun had dipped low, spilling orange light through the blinds. The room looked like it was on fire, beautiful and haunting at the same time. Ryan stood by the window looking out. He turned when he heard me stir. You should be resting, he said gently. I've been resting all my life, I said with a faint smile. He chuckled, shaking his head. You sound like Dad when you say things like that. The mention of Robert didn't sting this time. It almost felt like a memory we could finally share instead of bury. A soft knock interrupted us. Dr. Lawrence stepped in, his usual calm expression replaced with something heavier. I knew that look. I'd seen it before, on doctors who had already written the ending before the patient had. Mrs. Hale, he said carefully, closing the door behind him. I have your new test results. Ryan turned, instantly alert. What's wrong? Dr. Lawrence hesitated. The heart failure has progressed faster than we expected. The medications are no longer maintaining rhythm as effectively as before. My chest tightened, not from fear, but from recognition. I had known this was coming. I had felt it in the way my breaths had become shorter, my energy thinner, my sleep deeper and heavier each night. What does that mean? Ryan asked. The doctor sighed. It means we're reaching the point where intervention will no longer help. We can make her comfortable, but it's time to start thinking about palliative care. Ryan froze, his eyes darting toward me. How long? Dr. Lawrence looked down. Days, maybe weeks. It's difficult to say. The words settled like dust, quiet, invisible, and everywhere. Ryan's voice broke. There must be something else you can do. She's just starting to. I reached for his hand, stopping him gently. Ryan, I whispered. It's all right. He shook his head fiercely. No, it's not. Not after everything we've just been through. Dr. Lawrence gave me a sympathetic nod before stepping out, leaving us in the hush of fading sunlight. For a long time, Ryan stood there, staring at the floor. Then, quietly, he said, "You knew, didn't you?" I nodded. "I felt it for a while now." His jaw tightened. "And you didn't say anything? What good would it have done?" I said softly. "You were both carrying enough. I didn't want my ending to be another burden." He sat down beside me, his voice shaking. "You're not a burden. You're the reason we even have something to fight for." I smiled faintly, tracing my thumb along the back of his hand. "Then promise me something." He blinked. "Anything. When I go, you don't let this family fall apart again. No more silence. No more pride. Just forgiveness." His eyes filled with tears. "I promise." Outside, the sky had turned crimson, the kind of sunset that looked like it was bleeding across the horizon. I closed my eyes, letting the warmth of it spill across my face, memorizing the light. It felt like the world giving me one last look before the night. But as darkness settled, a sudden sound from the hallway shattered the fragile calm. Hurried footsteps, panicked voices, and then a single word that made my blood run cold. Code Blue. The sound of those two words, Code Blue, sliced through the air like a blade. For a moment, the hallway outside my room erupted in chaos. Footsteps, shouting, the metallic clatter of carts being rushed forward. I felt my heart stutter in my chest, that uneven rhythm that had become too familiar lately. Ryan froze, turning toward the door, his face drained of color. "Mom, stay still," he said quickly, pressing the nurse call button. "Don't move." "I'm fine," I tried to say, but the words came out thin, trembling. My chest tightened again, not sharply, but in waves, like a tide I couldn't fight against anymore. Within seconds, Nurse Claire burst through the door, followed by two others. "Mrs. Hale?" she said urgently, checking the monitor. The beeping had sped up, erratic, unstable. "I think it's me," I whispered weakly. The code. "It's me." She didn't answer. Instead, she pressed the emergency intercom and called for the crash team. Everything after that blurred into motion. The hiss of oxygen, the cold sting of metal, Ryan shouting my name, his voice breaking like glass. "Stay with me, Mom. Please stay with me." I wanted to answer, but the world had already started to dim at the edges. My ears filled with static, like the sea rushing into my head. Somewhere beyond the blur, I could hear Dr. Lawrence's voice, calm, controlled, fighting against inevitability. "Get the defibrillator now. We're losing her rhythm." I thought of all the things I hadn't said yet. The second letter I'd meant to write, the words I'd planned to leave behind. But time, I realized, never waits for you to finish your goodbyes. The world flashed white, the jolt of electricity coursing through my chest. My body lifted, then fell. Another flash. Another sound. Ryan's sobs broke through everything. "Please, don't let her go." Then silence. Complete, absolute silence. For a moment, I thought it was over. Everything was weightless, the noise fading into nothing but the soft hum of memory. There was no pain, only light, soft and endless, spreading through the darkness like dawn. And in that light, I saw faces. Ethan as a boy, chasing Ryan through the yard. Robert standing in the doorway, smiling the way he used to before the world hardened him. My own mother's voice somewhere behind me, calling me home. It was peaceful, the kind of peace I had spent my whole life chasing. Then, just as I was ready to step into it, a sound cut through, faint, desperate, familiar. Ryan's voice. "Come back, Mom. Please. You can't leave me yet." And just like that, the light began to fade. A crushing weight returned to my chest. air forcing its way into my lungs. My body trembled as the machines roared back to life. Someone was shouting, "We've got a pulse." My eyes flickered open. The world snapped back, blurred faces, bright lights, the smell of antiseptic and sweat. Dr. Lawrence leaned over me, his voice steady but soft. "Welcome back, Mrs. Hale." Ryan was crying openly now, his hand gripping mine. "You scared me," he said through a broken laugh. "You really scared me." I tried to smile, though my lips barely moved. "You're not that easy to get rid of," I managed to whisper. The team slowly filed out, leaving just the two of us in the quiet aftermath. My body ached, my heart monitor still flickering unevenly, but I was alive, barely. I turned my head toward Ryan. His face was still wet with tears. "Maybe," I said softly. "I'm still here because I wasn't finished yet." He frowned. "Finished with what?" "With saying goodbye the right way," I whispered. But as night fell again, and the hospital lights dimmed to amber, I realized I wasn't the only one with something left unsaid. Because when Ethan returned, he carried a secret of his own, one that would shatter what little peace we'd rebuilt. The night crept in slowly, wrapping the hospital in its muted glow. Outside my window, the city lights blinked like scattered stars, far away, indifferent, beautiful. I was still here, though I wasn't sure how. Every breath felt like a small miracle, every heartbeat an echo of something borrowed. Ryan had fallen asleep in the chair beside me, his head tilted back, exhaustion etched into his face. He'd refused to leave even after the nurses urged him to rest. Seeing him like that, protective, loyal, grown, made something inside me ache with quiet pride. It was near midnight when the door opened again. The sound was soft, cautious. Ethan stepped inside, his face pale, his tie loose, eyes rimmed red. He froze when he saw Ryan asleep. "How is she?" he whispered to Nurse Claire, who was tidying the IV stand. "She's stable, but it was close," Claire said gently. "Try not to wake her if you can." But I was already awake. "It's all right," I said, my voice faint but steady. "Come in, Ethan." He turned, startled. Then, slowly, he stepped closer to the bed. The low light from the monitor cast long shadows across his face, carving the years into sharper relief. "You should be resting," he said softly. I smiled weakly. "That's what they keep telling me." He hesitated at the foot of the bed, hands shoved deep in his pockets. There was something different in his posture. Not just guilt this time, but fear. Real fear. "What is it?" I asked. He looked down, exhaled shackily, and pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket. His hands trembled as he handed it to me. "I didn't mean for you to find out this way," he said, his voice breaking. "But I couldn't lie anymore, not after what happened today." I took the paper, unfolding it carefully. The header read, "Medical Report, Genetic Testing Division." My eyes flickered to the bottom of the page, to the line that caught my breath like a hook. "Patient Ethan Hale, result positive for congenital heart disorder familial." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The letters blurred as tears welled in my eyes. "Ethan," I whispered. "When?" He sat down heavily in the chair beside me. "A few months ago, after I started feeling dizzy all the time, short of breath. I thought it was stress, but the doctor said it's hereditary, something I might have inherited from Dad. Or you." The room tilted. "You've known this whole time?" He nodded, shame burning in his eyes. "I didn't tell anyone because I didn't want you to worry. I thought I could handle it, fix it, like everything else. But when you collapsed, when I saw you hooked up to those machines," his voice broke, "I realized I'm not invincible. I'm just like you, fragile." Tears slipped down my cheeks. I reached for his hand, gripping it tightly. "You're not fragile, Ethan. You're human, and you don't have to fix everything. Not anymore. He shook his head. I can't lose you, Mom. Not now. I still haven't earned the right to be forgiven. You earned it when you walked in this room, I said softly. The rest? That's just life reminding us we don't get to control how it ends, only how we meet it. He leaned forward, resting his forehead against my hand. I'm scared, he whispered. So am I admitted. But maybe that's what makes us brave, staying anyway. We sat there in the dark, mother and son, hearts beating unevenly, but in rhythm all the same. Two broken clocks, still managing to keep time together. The monitors hummed softly beside us, the sound steady, reassuring. For the first time, I didn't feel afraid of the end. Not because I was ready, but because I knew I wouldn't be facing it alone. But as dawn began to break, pale and gold across the city skyline, a single unexpected call would come through the hospital phone, carrying an offer neither Ethan nor I could have imagined, one that might change both our fates forever. The world was just beginning to wake. Faint sunlight seeped through the blinds, painting pale gold lines across the white hospital sheets. The quiet hum of the machines blended with the distant sound of carts rolling down the corridor. Ethan had fallen asleep in the chair beside me, his hand still loosely holding mine. I studied his face, the same tired lines, the faint resemblance of his father's jaw, the boy who had once hidden behind my skirt after breaking a window. For all the pain, all the years between us, I loved him no less. Maybe more now, because love feels deeper when you know time is short. I thought of the test results he'd shown me. The words, congenital heart disorder, burned into my memory like a scar. He'd inherited my weakness, carried it quietly, just like I'd carried my secrets. Maybe that was the cruelest gift I ever gave him. My heart, flawed in both love and flesh. The phone on the bedside table rang softly, startling me from my thoughts. I turned my head. It was early, too early for routine calls. Ethan stirred but didn't wake. I reached for the receiver, my hand trembling slightly. Hello, Mrs. Hale? A woman's voice said, calm but professional. This is Dr. Patel from the transplant coordination team. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time. My pulse quickened. Transplant? Yes, ma'am. Your cardiologist submitted your name to our emergency priority list last week. I wanted to inform you that a donor heart has just become available. It's a match. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The world around me seemed to blur. The walls, the beeping monitor, even my own voice. A match? Yes, she continued. It's rare to find one with such compatibility, especially given your condition. We'll need to prepare immediately. Can you confirm your consent for surgery? My heart hammered. I looked at Ethan, still asleep beside me, the soft rise and fall of his chest, the exhaustion etched deep in his face. A new heart, a second chance. It was what everyone dreams of, but then I remembered his medical report, his condition, his fear, the shared fragility that linked us now, mother and son. I swallowed hard. Doctor, may I ask something? Of course. This donor heart, who was it for originally? There was a pause. The donor list is confidential, Mrs. Hale, but I can tell you the heart came from a young male in his 30s. It was rerouted after another patient's condition stabilized. A young man. My mind twisted around the irony. Somewhere, a mother had just lost her child, and that loss might save my life. Mrs. Hale? The doctor prompted gently. Do we have your consent? I looked at Ethan again. He had shifted slightly in his sleep, murmuring something under his breath. Something like, Mom, stay. Tears welled in my eyes. Doctor, give me a moment to think. Of course. But we'll need a decision within the hour. The line clicked, leaving only the soft hum of the monitor. and the sound of my son breathing beside me. A new heart, a miracle. And yet, something inside me resisted, because miracles aren't free. They always ask for something in return. I reached out and brushed a strand of hair from Ethan's forehead. He looked so young in that moment, so fragile. Maybe life wasn't offering me a second chance. Maybe it was offering me a choice. And as the hour slipped away and the doctors prepared for surgery, I realized the truth. The heart waiting for me wasn't the only one on borrowed time, because Ethan's was too. And one of ours wouldn't make it through the morning. The hospital room felt heavier that morning, not from the air, but from the weight of the decision pressing against my chest. Outside, dawn had turned the sky into a watercolor of pink and gold, too beautiful for a day that felt like it could break me. I stared at the phone, at the silent line that waited for my answer. A new heart, a miracle, a chance to live. But how do you accept life when you know it might cost another theirs? Ethan stirred beside me, rubbing his eyes. Mom? His voice was soft, groggy. What's going on? I hesitated, then forced a small smile. That was the transplant coordinator. They found a match. He blinked, the words sinking in slowly. A heart? You mean it's happening? I nodded. They want to prep for surgery in an hour. For a moment, pure relief crossed his face. But then something shifted, a flicker of worry, deep and familiar. Are you going to do it? He asked. I don't know, I admitted. He frowned, leaning forward. Mom, this is what we've been praying for. You have too. I studied him, the way his hands trembled, the faint shadow beneath his eyes. And what about you? I asked quietly. He blinked. Me? You have the same condition, I said softly. You need help too. If something happens to me during surgery, stop, he interrupted, shaking his head. This isn't about me. You're getting that transplant. You have to. I reached out and took his hand, squeezing it gently. Ethan, life doesn't always work that way. Sometimes, the right thing isn't the thing that saves us. It's the thing that saves someone else. Tears filled his eyes. You can't give up now. Not after everything. I'm not giving up, I said. I'm choosing peace. He opened his mouth to argue, but just then, there was a knock at the door. Dr. Patel entered, her face kind but urgent. Mrs. Hale, we're ready when you are. We just need your signature for consent. Ethan looked at me pleadingly. Please, Mom, do it. I looked at the pen she held out, then at my son, the man who had once been the little boy I'd carried through storms, the boy who had finally learned to face his own. And suddenly, I knew. I took the form in my trembling hands, glanced at it once, then quietly slid it toward her. Doctor, I said, there's someone else who needs it more than me. Her brow furrowed. I'm sorry? My son, I whispered. Ethan Hale. He's a match too. He hasn't told you yet. He's sick. Please, test him. If his heart is failing like mine, and if there's any chance this donor can save him, then I want it to be his. Ethan's face went white. Mom, no. You can't. I reached for his face, cupping it gently. You gave me life once. Let me return the favor. Tears streamed down his cheeks as he shook his head. You don't get to decide that. I already have, I said softly. And one day, you'll understand, love isn't holding on. It's knowing when to let go. Dr. Patel hesitated, eyes glistening, then nodded. I'll make the arrangements. As she left, the sunlight caught the edge of Ethan's tears, turning them to gold. He buried his face in my lap, sobbing quietly. I stroked his hair the way I used to when he was a boy. It's okay, I whispered. You'll live. That's all I ever wanted. The world grew softer then, the hum of machines fading, the light deepening to gold. I closed my eyes, feeling my heart falter, but full. So full it almost hurt. And just before the darkness took me, I heard his voice through the tears, steady, breaking, alive. "I love you, Mom." "I know," I whispered. "That's why I can go." When they tell my story, I hope they don't remember how I died, but how I loved, because in the end, love was the only heartbeat that ever really mattered.